the session is, we likely will be sending it out to additional organizations who may not have been able to join today. If you wouldn't mind, for those of you who are from other organizations, if you could put in the chat what group you're with. We will get an attendance report later, but it will help us understand where you're coming from as well. So if you could put in the chat, if possible, what organization you're from. Additionally, any questions that you have throughout the presentation, you can either raise your hand or put in the chat, and we'll address them. We won't wait to the end. We'll address them as quickly as we can. Okay, so again, here are our objectives today. Our goal is to provide guidance to this group. We assume most people who are attending this today are from IT, possibly supporting desktop images and whatnot for your respective organizations. So again, why is Okta FastPass relevant? Okay, Okta FastPass is a non-smartphone based MFA option for users who either do not have modern smartphones or those users who are preferring not to install an authenticator app on their personal device. Again, we first reached out to our user community back in around November 1st of last year and strongly recommended Okta FastPass, which is a smartphone-based app. But we did get feedback, and feedback ultimately led to an extension of the SMS retirement, and it also allowed us to develop additional non-smartphone-based solutions. We will show you how FastPass works. I know some of you may have been on our support sessions a couple of weeks ago. So for some of you, this may be information you've seen before, but it won't take very long, and I'd like to show you FastPass in action. VITA did deploy FastPass to all Cove laptops last August, but until last weekend, FastPass did not work with Cardinal logins. Once we do the demo, we're going to then go to a VITA job aid knowledge article, and then I'm going to let Luis primarily walk this group for. And as I mentioned, throughout this entire session, we welcome questions. We will not hold to the end. So put your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll try to address them, since probably you'll have the same question that others will have. Are there any questions right now we need to address? Again, if possible, like folks are doing in the chat, please let us know what organization you're from. Okay, 1 second. Okay, before we get to the demo, I wanted to go over just a slide that, again, we used during the support sessions we ran in late February and early March. This, in essence, shows all of the MFA options that will remain available after VITA retires SMS and voice in early April. And again, I know most of you are IT, but the main reason SMS and voice is being retired is for security reasons. They are not as viewed, SMS is not viewed in the industry as secure as other methods. Again, the top 3 lines here are all the smartphone apps, okay? So for users who have a smartphone, used to using it, willing to use it, we still are recommending the smartphone apps. Our support desk team is most familiar with Okta Verify, so that's why we're saying Okta Verify is our recommended solution, but we recognize that some other organizations already use other authenticator apps, such as Google Authenticator, Duo, Rapid Identity, Microsoft Authenticator. All of those will work as well, although Duo, Rapid Identity, and Microsoft Authenticator will still be, you'll look like you're selecting Google Authenticator when you're setting them up, but they will still work. But today we're primarily talking about Okta FastPass. Again, these are for your users who either do not have that modern smartphone or are resisting, for whatever reason, using a smartphone app. Any questions so far? Okay, we'll talk a little bit about YubiKeys at the end of this. We do recognize that some users have their own YubiKeys. We do understand in some situations that organizations have given YubiKeys for other reasons. YubiKeys are an option as well, but obviously either the organization or the user would have to purchase a YubiKey. So that's why we're still saying FastPass is our recommended non-smartphone solution. Okay, so we're going to do a little FastPass demo, and then I'm going to come back to the slide. Okay, so I'm going to get out the deck for a second. So again, I have a Cove laptop in front of me that I'm using today, and VITA deployed Okta Verify, and Luis will talk about this a lot later, to all of the Cove laptops back in the fall timeframe. A couple things to note: I'm calling it Okta FastPass. That's what it is commonly referred to. But like everything else, sometimes things are a little bit confusing because the app looks like it's called Okta Verify, both on a mobile device and when installed on a laptop. But I'm going to continue to use the words FastPass today, and I do kind of recommend that you view it that way because it will get confusing otherwise. Okay, so I have right now Okta Verify only set up for my network account, but I'm going to demonstrate how to set up Okta FastPass for my what we call PPS account, which is how I log into Cardinal. So this will be important. Luis will go over this more, but basically you're setting up FastPass specifically for the Virginia Okta tenancy. When you set up any multi-factor, you do have to authenticate yourself. Again, I'm using a different account here, my PPS account, which is equivalent to a non-Cove account. Now, because I have other authenticators already set up, I am going to actually use, in this case, I have to authenticate myself before I can set up FastPass. So I'm going to use texting. I still have it for demonstration reasons. I'm going to enter my code that comes in, my SMS code. Okay, so this is where there will be a few different ways how this can work, okay? Because Cove laptops have Windows Hello turned off, when that occurs, biometrics can't be used. So the Cove approach, which many of you may also do if you have Windows Hello turned off, is an 8 or more passcode that users will create. This is not the same as a network password, okay? This is a one-time, more like a PIN that you would use at your bank, right? So I created my network passcode. Okay, so I've set up FastPass now for my PPS account as well. And now I'm going to demonstrate how I can log into Cardinal with my PPS, I'm going to log into Cardinal with FastPass. Okay, so I already have my screen logged in. I'm going to enter my password. And then essentially, because I made FastPass my default, FastPass comes up and I'm able to enter my passcode, and then I can cleanly get into Cardinal and I don't have to use my smartphone for MFA. Are there any questions in the chat at this point? The Cardinal now functions like it always does. Okay, before I turn it over to VITA, I'm just going to say to Luis from VITA just a few more things about this slide. You will get a copy of these slides later. But again, the Windows install does require local admin rights, which is why we think for most situations it would be IT organizations that would deploy versus the end user installing. At Cove, right, we don't have local admin rights. So this is an application that gets deployed. If that's not true for your organization, it might be different and you might be able to have users install on their own. Again, we talked about this, but if Windows Hello is enabled, biometrics can be used instead of that passcode. If you have users who use Apple laptops, it is a more straightforward install and is simply an app from the App Store that the user can download. Then, like your fingerprint, their fingerprint can be used to authenticate, can be used to do MFA. So I know there's some universities on here, and if you guys are using Apple laptops, FastPass works very, very nicely in that situation. If you use a setup similar to VITA, just to call out again, that's a passcode. We have had users who think it is a network password. So what they do is they enter their 14-character network password when they set up FastPass, and then they get messed up when they eventually have to change their network password. So a call out, we try to have users to avoid that. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, Luis, at this point, and I have the job aid that in essence is out there that's available to the folks on this call, and we'll send out again. If you can walk the group through, and again, questions, we really hope people will have questions at this point if you need more information.
All right, I appreciate that, Rogers. I'm Luis here. You may have seen my face before on some of the other calls we've had. I'm just going to pop off camera for some of the distraction here, but we're going to walk through basically the instructions here. I'm going to point out some really important information that you need to consider while going through the process, as well as some potential errors that you may come across when we can point you to the right way to resolve it. So there's some prerequisites. As mentioned, you do require admin rights to the device that you're installing it on, of course. That is one of the prerequisites. One of the other prerequisites you see here is in reference to whitelisting. What do we mean by that? Well, it can mean a few different things depending on your organization. One, sometimes you just generally want to whitelist the traffic going to Okta to prevent any kind of issues. But overall, you do need to, if you're doing SSL inspection via your proxy, if you have that in your environment, you're going to need to put a SSL inspection bypass for those URLs. Now that may sound concerning, but the reason why that's needed is because the Okta client will monitor its traffic, and if it's modified in any way, which includes the decryption, so it basically is validating the integrity, right? So that way it's not being compromised by a man-in-the-middle attack. So it doesn't allow for any kind of inspection on it. So that's why you'll get a error if you do have it in your environment and you have not added the bypass for it. And what does that error look like? Well, when you're actually doing the enrollment, you'll see that when you go to type in the URL, and depending on how you go about the configuration, you may want to pre-populate the URL so that way it's a little bit easier, which is we'll get to those options down further. But you'll get a error response saying the URL is not secure or site's not secure. And that's a very easy telltale sign that your traffic's being inspected or manipulated in some way, and you'll need to put in a bypass. You'll have to work with your network team on that, or your network provider for that. Okay. So, and then obviously what you're going to need to do before you can go through that is you're going to have to download the actual package, right? That link will actually download the latest package for Okta FastPass. And as mentioned, we just refer to as Okta FastPass because that is the methodology that the Okta Verified desktop uses. So we just generally always refer to as FastPass. Now, in regards to Windows, that actually does auto update by default. It is the only one that auto updates. Technically, your mobile devices will check in naturally and have you recommend that you download the latest, right? And then, of course, for the Mac devices, you can just, the store is going to be available to have the latest download. For Windows, you can use this link here and it will auto update out the box. There is a way to disable the auto update if you wish to pursue that as well. But sometimes it's just easier to allow it to update on its own. Okay. All right. After you do download it, it is going to make it easier if you actually rename the file and save it to your C drive as part of the call out, because you're going to have to do the change directory in the command prompt further down. All right. So going down a little bit further. So you've downloaded the file, right? You have it ready, but in regards to biometrics or passcode authenticators, what Rogers was sharing was the passcode configuration. And that does require that you install it using a command prompt. Whether you package that task to generate a command prompt, you can technically use SCCM if that's what you're using in your environment for software deployment. You can still go through that methodology rather than installing it manually on a device per device case, right? So the important call out here is that we had to go through that process of doing the deployment using that command prompt through SCCM because we don't have Windows Hello enabled in our environment. If you do have Windows Hello enabled in your environment, I would suggest going with the default installation because it's much easier. You just go out the box, double click on it, and it opens up and walks through the process, or you can deploy it that way, right? It makes it a whole lot easier if you have it in your environment. But we understand that a lot of organizations do not have it enabled yet. So that's why we obviously had to have these instructions and walk you through the option to install it with the command prompt. In regards to the biometrics, obviously it's going to be depending if you have that environment, what your device does support. And it's going to be tying back to Windows Hello for Windows devices, of course. And then for Mac OS, it's the trying to remember the touch. Typically, it's the fingerprint on those devices. Last time I checked, but so deploying the client, you've already sorted out that you got to put in the bypasses. You've decided on what methodology or what's supported in your environment. Like I said, for the Windows Hello, you can just out the box. Well, we're going to go down into the other options down below. And technically, I'll say we did provide another option, even if you do have Windows Hello, and that has to do with pre-populating your URL. So in the options here, you'll see a few that you can either do just the actual install with the passcode option, or you can specify what URL. As you see in like section 3, use the appropriate URL. We have multiple environments in Okta. We have our production, which is the virginia.okta.com, but we also have a test environment. I don't expect any of you all to be using the test environment at all. So I would think that you could simply just use the URL virginia.okta.com, and that keeps things very simple. Because we are talking about Cardinal here, but I understand that it's possible you guys may have access to something else. But I would say keep it with a production URL, keep things simple from that standpoint. In this example here, if that's what you want to do, is pre-populate so your users aren't forgetting what the URL is that they need to type in when they're going through the enrollment registration process, you can pre-populate that for them, even with the Windows Hello option. All right, so we're just going to take it down a little bit further. And this is where I think the majority of you all are going to need. That's deploying without Windows Hello. As mentioned, we have two options here. One where you're just deploying it with the passcode option. We have the Okta Verify call out there. And then we have the option, actually, double check. It's been a little while since I looked at these. Preview. You're not going to use preview. You're going to use the standard production setup, and you want to specify if it's going to be passcode on that for those devices. You're going to really need, that's the key point. If you don't call out that it's not passcode, we do have a workaround just in case you do install it by default. Because people, we know when you download the file, you start clicking through just by force of habit, I would say. And it'll actually just run you through the install, and then you'll have to go back and make a change. But you download it, you save it to the proper location, and these are the files you're going to use. You're going to have to open up the command prompt, and in what's in bold here is actually what you're going to paste into the command prompt. So make sure you're selecting the code you want, or the command you want and need for your environment, which is going to be calling out the Okta Verify setup and designating the URL and designating that you're going to use passcode. So that's what's been highlighted right there. If you want to make sure you don't have any extra spaces, you can paste that into a text file really quick, like your notepad, just to make sure you didn't accidentally include a character somewhere else and then you run into an error, just keeping it clean that way. And then you take it from there and you can paste it in your command prompt. Once you paste it in command prompt, you hit the enter button and it's going to go through the prompts, right? So you're going to, select the install. Of course, this can all be done silently if you're using some software deployment, but it's really straightforward on the click-throughs. You select that you agree, you hit the finish button, and you'll have it pretty much deployed. So one of the things is on the next steps when you're seeing from a user icon, you don't necessarily see the icon upon the initial installation. We noticed that when we did our deployment for the Commonwealth with COV devices. That icon did not actually appear until after the user rebooted. So just consider that. Not to say that it wouldn't be functional, operational, it's just not showing up on the desktop by default. So it's still technically, you can go to your search bar down below and type in Okta, and then you're going to see it there technically. Thank you, Rich, for that. All right. So Roger's already walked you through what the enrollment looks like. Some things that I want to maybe call out is that you saw that Rogers actually had multiple accounts on his client. So you can have up to, I believe it's 10 accounts on your client. So in a scenario where you're dealing with various accounts for various things, that you do technically have that option. As well as we do the verification. So if it's a scenario where maybe it's a shared device or a kiosk, technically we expect, usually folks have their unique sign in for that device, but we have that additional layer of protection in case it's a shared device and it's in a shared space, they walk away. No one can use it unless they have that PIN or passcode that the user's established, right? So that kind of helps out there from that perspective. Some things that you might see is there is the icon at the top that does a health check. We're not doing any enforcement on the health checks for the client itself. So don't have to really be concerned about that too much. In these instructions that, yeah, go ahead and click on that if you don't mind. So you're going to see that, okay, our COV device is a little bit behind. Sometimes we don't release the patch exactly when it's available, right? There's a little bit of lag time when you go with the pilot deployments and whatnot versus production. So that just will flag that if there's something outstanding, but we're not enforcing anything that would block your access using this right now. So don't be alarmed by that. But at least it calls it out if your device is really behind, you might get some questions about that from your users. So technically in the, Roger, if you could bring that up on the settings side, you can actually change your PIN if you needed to. So if you go there, actually there should be, there is a way to, they may have changed it here, but there's a way you can usually change your passcode from here rather than the other process. The other process, if you forget your passcode or you have users that forget their passcode, we technically have to do an MFA reset. So that's a little bit, I know, of a little a pain point, but it's because that passcode is tied to your account. Actually, Rogers, if you click on your first one, on the top one there. So there you go. There's the change passcode option, right? So obviously you have to know your current passcode to update it. Rogers, you don't have to go through that right now, but I just want to make sure they knew the option was there. So they can change the passcode here, or if they forget it, then you're going to have to go to the MFA reset. Basically, it's going to end up resetting Okta Verify altogether, the Okta FastPass instance in this case, and they'll just go through the enrollment as they did initially. So they'll get prompted for a password when they log in, and they'll have to go ahead and register as they did initially.
And let's go one step deeper there, Luis. So since this is for non-Cove users, the Cardinal, in order for an MFA password to be reset, that is something that our help desk would do. So a user would submit a ticket to Cardinal, to VCCC with Cardinal in the subject and say need MFA reset. So we do this today in the SMS world when someone changes their cell phone number. This is typically how it's handled as well. So if a user does need an MFA reset for the reason we just spoke of, this would be something the Cardinal Help Desk team would do for your user groups.
And then speaking of like going in for a reset, there may be a situation where you're changing devices or laptops. If you have another authenticator that the user did enroll, they can technically enroll in multiple laptops or desktops, whatever you want to call it, depending on your scenario. They do have that option if they have something else available. If not, then they'll probably have to go through the reset process to register another device. The reason for that right now is because this doesn't generate an external code of any type, right? It's actually storing a key on the TPM of that device, which is really good because, well, the TPM is very secure, right? From that standpoint. So that's how it kind of reduces the man-in-the-middle attack threat vector, is because it's not letting anybody export the key or hand off the key in any way. As opposed to, say, like when you get the mobile code, technically someone could capture that, give you a false page, you enter that, and they capture that and enter and take over your account that way. So this is considered phishing resistant and is definitely one of the more secure options that's available. All right, I think that kind of covers it for the most part on the overview. I know there's probably going to be some questions. The rest of these instructions walk through what the end user experience is. Now, at the bottom, we do have a call out, though, in regards to if you went ahead and did the default install, or if the user went ahead and somehow they have access to their own device, they installed in their own device. There is a way to update the configurations. That way it goes from Windows Hello by default to the passcode option. Of course, they'll have to open up a command prompt, and this is where it gets a little bit questionable at times, maybe on who's doing the change, right? Because we're going to end up going to the registry setting. So go ahead and you open command prompt cmd.exe and just go ahead and open that up. Scroll down, Rogers, for me. You'll see that, click on it, and you're just going to type in regedit. So if someone already has this installed and now you're trying to adjust it, the settings so that it's not using Windows Hello, Windows passcode, this is what the steps are going to be going through. Hit the regedit, keep on scrolling down. You'll get the registry prompts. For us, obviously we have UAC enabled, so we have to go ahead and put in our admin permissions. Keep scrolling down. All right. And then, so once the prompt opens up, the registry opens up, you're going to navigate from computer, current user, software, Okta, and then Okta Verify. You may want to zoom in on that, Rogers, on that picture. So in there, it's going to say Windows Hello by default. And you can double click that entry and change it, and you're going to see that it's going to be Okta Verify passcode. You scroll down a little bit, Rogers, if you get a sec. So you'll see the entries of Windows Hello, and you're going to change it to Okta Verify passcode. You're going to hit the OK button. Typically for registry settings to change, it doesn't necessarily always take right away. My typical guidance is to go ahead and reboot the device, and then you'll see that you'll get the passcode option instead of the Windows Hello option. So it all goes back to, as you're going through the registration process, where instead of getting prompt to set up a passcode, if you didn't set it this way, you'll see the Windows Hello and it'll be an option to enable. And if you don't have it in your environment, you're not going to be able to enable it. And so at that point, that's where you're going to see that screen change from Windows Hello to the Okta verified passcode option that when Rogers was walking through, you saw him set that up. So kind of touched a little bit earlier on the common errors. If you want to scroll down a little bit more, that links there we have is the unable to enroll Okta Verify Windows. That URL is not secure. What I mentioned before, that was where if you have SSL inspection in your environment, you're going to need to bypass it. We know we've worked with a few localities. Some of them had done the whitelisting and the bypass, and they had some kind of other network inspection elsewhere they didn't realize. So it did take a little bit of time there. But that is literally what that error means nearly 95% of the time. Haven't come across it where it didn't mean that, honestly. So that's where you're going to see that error. If you don't have SSL inspection in your environment, you don't have that proxy service, then you may not need to do that extra step. So if you go quickly, if you want to test off on a one-off device, you can go ahead and go through the enrollment and see if you're going to get that error or not. And that's going to be your telltale sign if you have to do the whitelisting or not. Another common error we've seen is your device's TPM is locked and Okta Verified cannot be used for authentication at this time. We see that error when folks continue to put the incorrect passcode into their FastPass when they're going to go ahead and use it for authentication. I think it's maybe the third time. After the third time, it'll lock you out, and it'll be locked out for a short period of time. It's just easier sometimes to reboot when you get that, so you just free it up so you're not waiting. That's one of the kind of workarounds. And then, of course, if you continue to have that occur, that means you're still putting in the wrong passcode. It's best to go ahead and just reset your MFA so that way you can reestablish your passcode and not run into that error again. And of course, I know, Rogers, you said you shared this information with them on the instructions. Additionally, we have the resources on our VITA website. I can just drop the link in there for that. I think we had mentioned it on some of the previous calls. So, and Rogers, if I just take over for a quick sec, I was just going to take them to that website just so like some of the resources they can use, right?
Yep, go for it.
All right, just let me know when you can see my screen. I can zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, we can.
All right, so we did, set up this page related to this effort. Obviously, we needed it for both internal and external users, knowing that the amount of the population that's being affected. So we try to cover everybody that we could with the information we have here. We do talk about obviously, the other options that are out there. But we do have the job aids. We have links directly to these job aids. What Rogers walked you through on the enrollment process, we do have a video as well here. So if you want to do a short clip and share that with your staff, you could use that link. Feel free to use any of the resources that are on this page. This is the link to the work instructions that we just went over in regards to the guides for the installation. We are working on a video for the actual installation already. It's almost ready. We're just doing a little bit of adjustments on the script in regards to the speaking points to make sure we're not confusing anybody. We think we'll have that probably ready by next week, possibly. And I'll make sure I share that with the team here so that way it can be dispersed. We will be putting it up here on the website, of course, on our side. But I want to make sure that that resource is readily available for you all. So that way you can actually just follow through. So it references the guide, but it actually walks you through putting the command into the command line and actually executing every step of the way. We do have another section down here, I'll say, where this says virginia-gov.okta.com. That is because we do know there are some other users that are working with other agencies that may have access to this other tenant of ours. So we did try to provide more guidance that's associated with that URL, so that way you can use those instead of using some of the others and getting confused. So we did break it out. We know that it's a very large population, a shared population, so we want to make sure we're giving you exactly what you need and where you need it. So these are, literally you just click on and they expand and you get the information you're looking for related to KB articles. So we do have that available for you all. I dropped the link already in the chat, so you have that. And then, of course, we do have some other kind of FAQs and things. I kind of touch on here. So we call it Okta FastPass. It works on all platforms, but this is typically what's used for your desktop. This is actually the only option that's available on the desktop as it stands right now. If you're using the mobile, which we refer to as just Verify, you obviously have those two other options where you have the push notifications and the TOTP option. Just wanted to call that out, is that we do have some guidance on that, clarification between the two. So, and that's really all I have today to share. I guess the next thing is to kind of go into questions and whatnot. What do you have next for us, Rogers?
Yeah, so effectively that I want to just talk about UB keys for a second, and then we'll go into questions. So again, we're not overly publicizing UB keys, but they will work for Cardinal. But again, the organization or the user would have to have. There is a slight change to the Cardinal login user flow. If someone is using a UB key, they will actually first go to virginia.okta.com and have their UB key set up for virginia.okta.com. And then for subsequent times when they need to get to Cardinal, they'll log into virginia.okta.com with their Cardinal account credentials. And then once authenticated with their security key, they will not have to be required to re-authenticate to Cardinal. So they'll just basically go to the my.cardinal.virginia.gov link, and single sign-on will work, and they will be able to get into Cardinal with that UB key. So that is an option. Again, because of the cost factor and other reasons, we're not overly promoting that, but that is an option if you wanted to go that route or some of your users wanted to go that route. In terms of next steps, and then we'll take questions. And again, we know we are continuing to get, we sent out comms last week. We have to continue to encourage users to move away from SMS by early April. We know in some cases open enrollment is relevant. It's right around the corner for certain parts of our user community. We also know it's tax season and people may need to see W-2s and good stuff like that. So we will continue to reinforce the need to move away to SMS. Okay. That translates to us getting tickets, right? From a subset of users who say, I don't have a smartphone, or I'm not willing to use my smartphone. What we are going to be doing is basically telling the users that there are other options, but they need to contact their support organizations. Behind the scenes, we're going to do everything we can, not just for the folks on this call today, but for other organizations as well, to say that John Smith doesn't have a smartphone and needs a way to get into Cardinal, right? So, but ultimately that deadline is staring us all in the face, right? And we need to get away from SMS. We know you may have more questions after the session. Again, we are a ticket-based organization, so the best way to get support from us is to send an email to vccc@vita.virginia.gov with Cardinal Okta FastPass in the subject. We've had some questions in chat, but this is your time. We have until 2 o'clock. If anyone wants to ask any questions, you can come off mute and ask them, or again, put them in the chat. It looks like we have a hand raised. Yeah, Joby.
Yeah, so from a large organization perspective, we have a lot of shared computers, so we manage a lot of courtrooms and other things like that where computers are deployed, where you're going to have lots of people signing into these things. Don't get me wrong, they shouldn't be accessing Cardinal from most of the courtroom PCs, but how do we go about deploying FastPass to shared environments? It looked like all the things you were showing. The basic command prompt that you guys were showing, that's straightforward, no big deal there. but the configuration, it looks like, is all at the HKey user side, which means it needs to be installed for every single user. Is there any way to deploy this en masse to a computer where the
No,
default settings are at the HKey local machine level?
Right, you can set the settings to be at the local machine level as well. And that's actually, I think, how we went about it on the COV side when we did the actual deployment itself. But we know that in order to override whatever may have been done by default, it's just an easier quick reference for the current user to set it differently. That usually has to be, that key does have to be changed.
Do you guys have any documentation on for organizations that have to deploy this across large numbers of PCs? You know, we're managing 5,000-6,000 PCs across the judicial branch. Do you have any documentation on here's how you can do that, or advice on how to do that? You know, things like this HKey local machine. If you hadn't told me, we wouldn't have known because we saw nothing about it. So we use SCCM. What kind of guidance or other things do you have for us?
I was gonna say, what software deployment do you use in your environment?
SCCM.
That's SCCM. Okay.
Yep.
So I mean, the way I can technically, right, with that command, if you're going to leverage that through SCCM, it, like I said, you're setting the passcode there. You don't have to go in and set it on every device. Like if you're going to be deploying that command throughout all your devices, that does deploy on the device itself. It's not just the profile that it's associated with. It's just when we went to go back and do the troubleshooting, to like someone installed it incorrectly for whatever reason, you would have to go back to that user's instance at that point in time. I'm not sure if that really, I mean, I don't have instruction from the SCCM side.
If we run this as an administrator on these machines en masse using SCCM, we deploy a package and it runs this command, it's going to put the default, you know, because we don't, like you, we don't have Windows Hello enabled. So we're going to have to go to the passcode option. Yep. And we want to default the URL to save as new people are onboarded and offboarded from, you know, the various different courts across the state, that they don't have to remember, oh, go to virginia.okta.com. We want that URL defaulted, and we want the PIN,
the passcode configuration,
passcode be the configuration. So if we run those commands as administrator, that's the default configuration. Now anybody who starts it, that's the way it's going to start. Now if they change that, that's going to be stored to their HKey local user, is what you're saying.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Okay, but it will default by pulling from HKey local machine to that HKey local user when they launch it. So we don't have to worry about trying to say anytime a new user logs into a machine, we got to configure these registry settings.
Correct. Yep. If you're using that command for the passcode, it will apply to the local machine. So you'll be good there. And including the current user will be set there. Only if you need to flip it after the deployment of the software, would you have to go into the current user for that specific account. So
the only other question I have, and then I'll stop monopolizing the time, is the communications we've seen say that this is not an officially supported thing, and that's been a pretty hard thing for us to chew on over here in the judicial branch, to have this thing be forced on us by the executive branch and then have the documentation say we do not support it as the executive branch. But then in these conversations, when I've participated in these meetings, we've heard that, well, we support it as best we can. But the messaging that's coming out officially is saying that VITA does not support FastPass for other agencies.
So
what's the route to fix that messaging?
Yeah, and it has to do with, I mean,
I get that you cannot
we're limited on who we can support.
Uninstall in our environment, but at the same time, we can't do resets. We can't do certain things either. So
right, and we will support all those aspects. So I guess it's maybe the language may needs to be that you
guys need to soften
limited support based on what we can do, right?
Or that support is a shared effort between your local agency and VITA. But right now, I was kind of dead set on not deploying this because it says explicitly VITA does not support it, period. So good luck, agencies, go forth and conquer. But I don't think I'm going to win that fight with my legal counsel.
Right. Yeah. So that's a fair point. We'll talk internally and see if we can make adjustments accordingly. So that way it's you guys aren't feeling like you're completely in the dark on that one.
That'd be greatly appreciated. All right, that's it from my side.
Hi, this is Emilio over in VCCS.
Hey, Emilio.
Hey, I kept thinking about this. I'm couldn't think about how to say this without being the jerk. So I warned you ahead of time. I'm the jerk, and I apologize ahead of time. So this is not Okta FastPass. So this is Okta Verify for desktop. Is there any plan to actually use Okta FastPass, which is the passwordless configuration, or is there a way to users in the individual accounts to activate it as a passwordless option instead of using it as just regular Okta Verify for desktop?
Right. That's a fair point and call out. We're not ready to make that step without some additional validations. The reason why is, well, it comes into play where yes, your Okta Verify client is acting in the possession factor, right? You have it on the device. But then when you're putting in either the biometrics, that would be something you are. And so there's your MFA technically from that standpoint, or you're putting the passcode, it's something you know. We haven't taken the step of going fully passwordless yet. There are some concerns there on how we're going about that because if it's going with the passcode configuration, there's no force to change the passcode. And so then we're running into some compliance issues regarding that aspect instead of how we're using it now, which we're just using it in a verification standpoint to confirm that it's your authenticator rather than it being used as the MFA together overall. So that's why we haven't gone down that road of saying, yes, this is the passwordless solution.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's a good explanation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jerk mode turned off.
I mean, and if we were in a different state, I think for all of us in a situation where we knew we could check and confirm everybody was using Windows Hello, then that would be a different story. Because then yes, you got the device, from that standpoint, it's in your possession. Then that's just something you're having, then the BIOS, right? And we know that would be a fairly secure overall from an access standpoint. But we know, like as in the CUV, the Commonwealth, we have to use a passcode. And that's really not the most secure thing if you were using it as part of the authentication in itself as part of the MFA. So right
Don't
now
worry,
we're just
I'm the jerk at the VCCS level complaining that people don't have Windows Hello turned on at different schools. So I fully understand.
yeah. And I'll say on the Commonwealth level, like here at VITA, we're pursuing that. We're trying to get that. It's just taking a little bit of coordination, and obviously, we're not able to move as quickly as we'd like, but we plan to have that in the future. So I hope others are able to adopt that because obviously it's a much more user-friendly experience when you're using the Windows Hello option. So
And it's more secure. Yeah. So
yes.
Yep.
Other questions from the group? Good discussion. Okay, we will be sending out this deck. It does contain the link that Luis put in the chat. And again, we're trying as best we can to, when we get tickets in, we're going to respond and then continue to be in touch with all of you as well as other partners who are not on this meeting today.
Just going to add one more piece. I know we were really focused on the organizational devices when it comes to Okta FastPass, but there's nothing to say that, obviously a lot of folks use their personal mobile for accessing Cardinal and whatnot and other applications, right? A person could technically install Okta FastPass on their personal device as well. It just depends on your policies on how you guys want to go about it. So it's a secure method, so I support it regardless if it's on a organization device or a personal device, but that just makes a difference in regards to what level of support you can get, right? So just wanted to share that bit.
One last time around. Okay, thanks so much for attending. You'll see a follow-up comm from us with this deck by tomorrow or so. If you have any other questions, please reach out through our ticketing system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.